your Bibles, turn over to the Song of Solomon. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that we are looking at one incredible book, but it is rarely preached on, okay? And for those of you that might be joining us for the first time, we are actually, what's interesting is we are in week 22 of this, where we're taking the books of the Bible every week. And so tonight we are up to the Song of Solomon. We've been in this for half a year, almost half a year, not quite. Was that? Yeah, a third of the way, over through. We are. And so, man, this is going by quick. But we are in the Song of Solomon. As I said, this book is a book. It is an incredible book. It is rarely preached on. But I will say this, it needs to be preached on. Especially in our society today, I'll go ahead and tell you, in our day and age, they need to hear this. I was sharing with Kyle and Brian back there in the back a while ago. This is a book that I go through for premarital counseling on. I always have those 4 hours that is recommended by the state as far as for them to get a discount on premarital counseling. And so I take up that 4 hours. The first 2 hours is actual counseling, going through some questionnaires and different things that I share with them through Scripture. The last 2 hours is the Song of Solomon. Are you going to say we're being here for 2 hours tonight? No, tonight is the overview. But we are going to be looking at some things. But the Song of Solomon, man, it is great. And matter of fact, I even go through this with couples that I feel like need this when they come to me for counseling. This is a wonderful, wonderful book. This book is a perfect picture of marriage. We are going to see attraction. We are going to even see hormones. We are going to see affection. We're going to see wedding. We're even going to see the honeymoon. That's in the Bible. It's in the Bible, okay? Then after that, then we see the reality of marriage. When the newness wears off, I'm just going to tell you, we're going to see them fuss and fight a little bit. And how that's in the Bible too. It's in the Bible. It's the reality of marriage. Am I right? Yes, it is. Shake your heads. You better shake your heads. It's the reality, okay? And we're going to see that, and that's what happens, okay? And we see, actually in this book, how do you fight clean? You wear gloves. Well, just kidding. No. But listen, that's the case. We see them work out their problems, and then we see them grow old together, okay? And we're going to see this right here. Now, because there are things in this book, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, that makes people uncomfortable. I was joking with the guys before. I said maybe I should have put an NC-17 rating on my Facebook post earlier. But because there are things that make people uncomfortable in this, the church has said, shh, we don't talk about those things. It's kind of like the illustration of the missionary that he went over and he was in the Amazon River and he was meeting with this tribe. And he noticed that as he was there with them and counseling them, he looked over and saw the women that were out there and they were washing clothes in the river. And he noticed there was an alligator right beside the ladies coming up. And he said, ladies, there's an alligator, look out for the alligator. And the tribe people beside him said, shh, we don't talk about that alligator. Well, then a few hours later, the ladies came out of the river, but he noticed that the alligator had made its way up on the bank, and there were kids playing around that area. And he said, yo, look out, there's an alligator. And they said, shh, we don't talk about that alligator. The guy's like, well, okay. Well, then at night, when the tribe people gathered together around the fire to eat supper, he looked over and noticed the alligator was sitting right behind a family. And the guy goes, oh my goodness, y'all, look out, there's an alligator right behind y'all. And they said, shh, we don't talk about the alligator. A few moments later, he heard just a blood, just curdling scream coming from when he looked over, and the alligator was dragging a small child back into the water, and the family was beating it and hitting it and trying to break its grip loose from the child. And the guy was like, I've been trying to tell y'all all day long about the alligator. And as he said that, another tribesperson looked at him and said, shh, we don't talk about the alligator. Oh. The man began to look around, and he noticed that there were many arms and legs missing there in the tribe. But yet the whole time they said, shh, we don't talk about the alligator. You see, my point is this. See, while our world is teaching our young people about its view of marriage and sex and things like this, and our families are being hurt, all the while the church is sitting back saying, shh, we don't talk about the alligator. Does that make sense? And that's something we need to remember. And you say, well, why not? Well, because we sit back and say, well, it's not proper. Well, my question is this. Who created marriage? God did. Matter of fact, I want to remind you, God ordained the family before he even did the church. Okay? Genesis chapter 2. By the way, that is a marriage ceremony. God brought the woman to be with the man, and Adam received it and said, this is why the man will leave father and mother to be joined as one to his wife. Okay, that is a marriage ceremony right there. Okay, so that is the case. Next question is this: who created hormones? God did. That's exactly right. So in other words, friends, why wouldn't it make sense that he would give us some wisdom over it in his word? Of course he would. But yet we sit back and say, shh, we don't need to talk about that stuff in church. He's given us a whole book on it. Now, I'll tell you, I actually expected a bigger crowd tonight, the Song of Solomon. But this is something interesting. I want us to get into this. This is what the Bible has to say about passion, about purity, and the beauty of marriage. In the world where we are struggling with the issue of purity, we do need to know what the Bible has to say about it, okay? So in the Song of Solomon, we see the importance of purity, but we also see the importance of something else. If you've got a sheet coming in, if didn't, please go back there and grab you one. But the issue is this. We see the issue of character. Character in this book. Character, what do you mean? Well, we see the importance of character. Now, very quickly, let me address the issue of character versus looks. Okay? In a relationship, I want you to notice some things. Character versus looks, okay? Now, let's just be honest, friends. What is the first thing that you notice about someone that attracts you to them? Let's just be honest. Looks. You may say, well, Brother Colin, I'm trying to be spiritual. I say their walk with the Lord is what attracts me. Garbage. Okay? Garbage. No. The reason why you go out with someone the first time is because you think they're cute. Okay? And you see that. Well, guess what? That is actually biblical. We're going to see that tonight. Okay? I want you to know that. But listen, that's great. But the reality is you've noticed your mate and you agreed to go out with them because you thought they were attractive. But let me give you those comparisons of looks to character. Okay? Write this down, actually. Write this down on the side up there. 3 points regarding looks to character. Very quickly. Number 1, looks don't last. Now, let me tell you something. I haven't always been this specimen. Okay? Felicia can tell you, 13 years ago, type deal. I might have gained a few pounds since then, right? But other than that, she is more beautiful than she was 13 years ago, right? But the issue is looks don't last. Number 2, write this thing down. This is interesting. Looks can fool you, but character will not. I'm going to say that again. Looks can fool you, but character will not. And the third thing regarding looks compared to character versus character is this. Looks are always canceled out by character. Think about that. What do you mean, Brother Colin? Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen somebody that when you first saw them, you're like, man, that is a beautiful person. That's a handsome man right there. You ladies, you may say that. Okay, guys, I hope you don't say that. But you may sit back and say, man, that is beautiful. But then you get to know them. And you realize they're not as attractive as you once thought they were. Right? Because of their character. Right? So we need to realize this. So in this book right here, I want you to understand that character is a big deal to both Solomon and the Shulamite, as it's going to say in the book. Shulamite means this, Mrs. Solomon. Okay? And we'll get to that here in just a moment. That's what it means. Now, according to 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32, Solomon, if you remember, we talked about this, he himself wrote over 3,000 proverbs and 108 songs. We have one song that is written in record right here, the Song of Solomon. We only have one. Only one. That's it that we have right here. But it's actually believed that Solomon and his wife, even though it's recorded for Solomon, but Solomon and his wife wrote this together. Okay? It is believed that they wrote this together. And once again, they took part in writing this. But I will tell you, they are actually older now. They are older, and what they are doing is they are telling the story of how they met, how they dated, how their courtship went, and their wedding, and then years afterwards. You may say, wait a minute, Brother Colin, hold up. We got to clear something up first and foremost, okay? We got to clear something up right here. I don't get this. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And you're saying that this book is about passion and purity and marriage and all this? Well, friends, yeah, he did, and we know that. As a matter of fact, he actually himself even addresses it later on in chapter 6. Flip over chapter 6. I want you to see this for yourself. Listen to what he says here in chapter 6. Now, I remind you, at this point in time, they were still younger, okay, when he was saying this part, what he's saying right here. But in chapter 6, start with verse 8, it says this. Now, at this time, he was able to say this. There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. My dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, the favorite one of the one who bore her. The daughters saw her and called her blessed. The queens and the concubines, and they praised her. In other words, listen to me. Yes, as I reminded you when we talked about that in 1 Kings, ladies, once again, I'm not trying to be sexist when I say this here, but you were property. You were given as gifts, okay? Especially given to the king. You were given as treaties, right? You were given as different things like that, and we talked about that. So once again, he had these other women, but according to this right here, he says, but there was one lady that had his heart. There was one that was his queen. And matter of fact, there in verse 9, he actually says that all those other ladies were jealous of her because they wanted what she had, which was his heart. Okay? So that's what we need to remember. Even though he had all those women in his life later on, and we're going to see them actually old later on in this book, he still held to that one lady being the queen. Okay? The one that meant the world to him. Okay? So I want you to know that. But these two are telling the story. Now, our outline, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. Your outline has it broken down actually in two parts, as you can see. But here's what I want to do tonight. I'm going to do things a little bit different. I'm going to give you my outline. Okay? I'm going to give you my outline and how I teach this to couples that come in. And I'm going to let you know that I believe there are actually 6 parts to the Song of Solomon. And this is how I've taught it for years to young married couples or couples that are getting married, and once again, even couples later on. But I'm going to give you my outline, and once again, as I do, I want you to write it down underneath, okay, or off to the side. You don't really have a lot of space underneath here, but you can write down the first 3 over here, then the second 3 over here, or you can turn it over and write down whatever you want. But let's jump into this tonight. Let's open up the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your love towards us. God, I thank you for giving us a guidebook of seeing what we need to learn and what a true relationship is to look like and to grow in. And so, Father, I pray that you use this time tonight and just speak to hearts. And, Father, let us apply what we learned tonight, Lord. God, we love you. We praise you. Use this time right now in a mighty way. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Number 1, I want you to write this down. The first thing I want us to see is this. We see the art of attraction in the Song of Solomon. The art of attraction. And this is from chapter 1, verse 1 to verse 8. If you want to write that down. Chapter 1, verse 1 to verse 8. Now we see what attracts her to him. His looks and his character. Listen to this very quickly. We're going to run through this very quickly. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. She speaks first. She says, for your love is better than wine because of the fragrance of your good ointments. Your name is ointment poured forth. Therefore the virgins love you. Draw me away. The king has brought me into his chambers. The daughters of Jerusalem say this, we'll be glad and rejoice, and you will remember your love more than wine. Stop right there for a second. She starts off by saying, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Physical attraction, right? There's a physical attraction there. But then she says something interesting. She says this. She says, because of the fragrance of your good ointments, your name is ointment poured forth. In other words, listen to me. My daddy loved Brute. Do you men remember Brute? It was the cheapest but worst smelling odor fragrance that you had. Dad loved it. Okay? And some of you may love it. I'm sorry if I just slammed it. Okay? But Dad loved Brute. Now imagine if I went to Walmart today and bought some Brute, okay? I buy some Brute. I don't even know. Does Walmart even still sell Brute? Does it? Yeah, it does. Okay, very good. All right, so I buy a glass bottle of Brute, okay? I come into my office and I immediately slam that bottle, an entire bottle down on my desk, and it breaks, and that fragrance, that stuff just goes all over my desk, leaves a mess for Frank and Sandra to clean up. I see their eyes already right now. Now, what would happen? Let me ask you. Would the smell of that cologne stay right on my desk? No, as a matter of fact, you would open your car door probably and be like, what is that? Right? I mean, it would go out. So in other words, here's the deal. Solomon's name, his good name, has gone out among the land. His character. So in other words, she's already said, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. She's physically attracted to him, but not only is she physically attracted to him, she likes his character. His name is ointment poured forth. It's gone out in the land, and they enjoy who he is, and she's dealing with this. But then she says something interesting. They are just me. And I'm about to say something interesting. Here's already the, shh, don't talk about this stuff. But they have just met, and she said this, the king has brought me into his chambers. What was the chambers?
His bedroom.
His bedroom. They have just met, and she's already thinking about something. What? The Bible couldn't be talking about this. Let me ask you, you got hormones? Has your mind ever went somewhere it shouldn't have gone to? You're not better than me. Come on. Yeah, you have. Okay? It's sin, but it's a reality. And that's what's happened right here. Okay? She's already thinking about this. And the friends, the daughters of Jerusalem, that's her friends, are saying this, we will be glad and rejoice in you. We'll remember your love more than wine. In other words, oh, this is going to be so good. You go for it. You go for it, girl. That's what's happening right here, okay? And so now I'm going to go ahead and tell you something. This lady we're seeing right here has low self-esteem. How do you know? Listen to verse 5. Verse 5 says this. I'm sorry I'm skipping, Alex. I'm going to try to get in as much as I can tonight. She says this, I'm dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not look upon me because I am dark, because the sun has tanned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. Now let's talk about this. They are different than who we are today. Women today pay thousands of dollars to lay in what I call the microwave oven. Okay? Why? Because our society today finds it beautiful for women to be tan, right? And men to be tan, right? And so that's a big commodity. Guess what? In the Middle East, they don't. As a matter of fact, if you remember old pictures of like the Chinese geishas and things like this, they would paint themselves white. Why? Because the paler they were, the more beautiful they were. But now, she's got a problem. Her brothers, for some reason, we don't know why, but they were angry with her, and they made her work in the vineyards with them. And because of that, she wasn't able to protect her skin properly, and so she got tan. Now, the issue is this. She says there, and I want you to notice that phrase right there. She says, they made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. What's her own vineyard? Herself, her body. Remember that later on, because that's a big deal. So she has low self-esteem. She's like, oh, I'm lovely, but I'm dark. He's not going to go for me. That's what she's thinking, okay? That's what she's thinking right here. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, she's still physically attractive, but now we see her character as well. We saw her physical attractiveness. She was still lovely, but now let's see her character. We saw Solomon's attraction. He was attractive, and then we saw his character, but listen to her character. Skip down to verse 7. She says, tell me, O you whom I love, where you feed your flock, where you make it rest at noon. For why should I be as the one who veils herself by the flock of your companion? In other words, here's the deal. She says, I want to know, it's kind of like this. Lady, do you remember when you were dating? And maybe even now that you've landed your man. But did you ever call and say, hey, what are you doing today? Hey, where are you going to be today? Right? That ever happen? Yeah, it happened. You know? Now, here's the deal. She says, hey, I want to know where you're going to be today. But I want to know where you're going to be at noon. Why noon? Because notice she says, for why should I be? She says, why should I be the one who veils herself by the flock of your companions? She wants to know where he's going to be at noon so she can go and talk to him and spend time with him. Because at the end of the day, there was a group of women that would come and they would stand at the end of the fields and they would veil themselves, but they were also known as prostitutes. And they would stand at the end of the fields and wait for the workers to get off work. And when they get off work, they'd go by. She says, I don't want to be known along with those women. She says, I want to know where you're going to be at noon. So there's no question that I'm not there for the wrong reasons. In other words, she's a woman of character. She's like, I want to know where it's going to be at noon. I don't want to be labeled among those women. And so we see not only her looks, but also her character. In both cases, though, notice something. Character was mentioned last. Because remember, character overcomes looks. That's good. But in both cases, that is the case. So we see the art of attraction. But then we get into the art of dating. They're going to go on a date. How do you know? Look at verse 9. Actually, verse 9, This is going to go through, this is number 2, the art of dating, verse 9 all the way through chapter 2, verse 7. Let's start with verse 9. That's what it says. He says, I've compared you, my love, to my filly among Pharaoh's chariots. Now stop right there for a moment. I remind you, this is Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. He had a way with words. Okay? Now, first of all, he says, my love. Now, in other words, that's a term of endearment. In other words, honey, sweet cakes, stuff like this, whatever it may be. He mentions this 9 different times in the book. But he says right here, he says, I've compared you, my love, to my filly among Pharaoh's chariots. Is he looking at her and saying, what's up, horse face? No. What he is saying is this, I want to remind you, or let me ask you this. Did they attach the sickly horses to Pharaoh's chariots? No, baby. He had the Clydesdales. He had the best horses in the land. It's Pharaoh, right? They didn't put the sickly horse. In other words, he's saying, honey, you're the best in the land. I'm telling you, he's a wise man. He's a wise man. That's what he says right here. So they're on this date, and this is what he's saying right here. But we see this, and he is bragging on her right off the bat, and he's pouring it on. And notice this. Keep on going down a little bit further. She says this, and we know they're at a date because of this. Well, look what he says. He brags on her. He keeps going. Listen to verse 12. She says, while the king is at his table, my spikenard sends forth its fragrance. They're eating. You got to eat when you go on a date, right? They're at the table. They're eating together. And now this answers the age-old question, do the women know what they're doing to us? What do you mean? You wonder, no, why do they wear that? Or why? She's smelling that way. Come on now. Well, I don't know, I just put something on. No. She is sitting there, she says, my spikenard, which is her perfume, is sending forth its fragrance. She knows what she's doing, okay? But they're here dating, and notice what he says. She says, or actually she goes on a little bit further, talks about him being a bundle of myrrh to me that lies all night between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henneblums in the vineyards of En-Gedi. Let me explain to you. That was right there where it talks about the bundle of myrrh. I remind you, they were not able to take a bath every day, okay? So what they would do is there was a piece of cloth, and they would put myrrh, which is incense, in that cloth. They would tie it up, put it to a string, and lay it down, or when they lay down, they'd put it right here. That way, when they woke up in the morning, they smelled good, right? Because they weren't able to take a bath every day. So she says, hey, all night long, you're to me like this. So now, where is he laying? Where is it? On her what? Chest, her heart, okay? And so, you're on my heart all night long. And she's telling him this, okay? And then he looks at her, look at verse 15. He says, behold your fair, my love, behold your fair. You have dove's eyes. Oh, he's pouring it on. You have dove's eyes. Now look at this. She cuts him off and she starts pouring it on. Listen to this. Behold, you are handsome, my beloved. Yes, pleasant. Also, our bed is green. What in the world? He looks at her. They're at the table and he says, you know what? You're looking good, honey. Smelling good. I smell that spikenard. Okay? And then she looks at him. He says, you have dove's eyes. She looks at him and says, oh, you're handsome as well. Yes, pleasant. Also, our bed is green. What in the world does this mean? Let me explain to you. You go to Walmart, E.W. James, anywhere else, pick up some bananas, and they're green. What does it mean about those bananas? They're not ripe. I heard somebody say it. They're not ripe. In other words, they're already dealing with passion. I remind you, the first time she saw him, she said, the king has brought me to the chambers, right? She was visualizing it. Now, they're on a date, and he says, you're good looking, honey. And she says, yes, you are too. Our bed is green. She had to remind herself, it's not ripe. It's not ready yet. That's good. Keep going. Okay? So they're dealing with passion right here. But notice, man, I want you to notice something else. They're pouring it on. They have to remain pure. They realize this. But I want you to notice something, man. And this is where this really hits home with all of us, guys. Because of his compliments, do you remember her self-esteem earlier on? I'm dark, yet I'm lovely, right? Now look at chapter 2, verse 1. I'm the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. Before, she had low self-esteem, but because of his compliments. Ladies, back me up on this. It affects what your men say about you, doesn't it? And that's what we see right here. Because of he's complimenting her, he's loving on her, he's making her feel special, She says, hey, I'm the rose of Sharon. I'm the lily of the valley. And then guess what? He cuts her off. And notice what he says right here. He says, like a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. Let me ask you this. Do lilies have thorns? No. In other words, it's a rarity to see a lily among the thorns. And then you know what she does? She cuts him off. And listen to this. She says this. I lost my place. All right, so there it is. So like a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. And he says, she says, like an apple tree among the trees of the woods. Guys, how many times have you been walking along the woods and all of a sudden there's an apple tree? It doesn't happen. You're not going to find an apple tree in the middle of the woods. In other words, she says, you're a rarity. That's what she's bragging on him. So is my beloved among the sons. And then, so in other words, they're going back and forth. They're bragging on one another. They're complimenting one another. And then we see the second date. The second date. Skip down to verse 4. He brought me to the banqueting house. That was the public house. Before they were at his table. They were in his palace. They're eating together alone. Now they're at the banqueting house, which is a public place. And notice this, she says, and his banner over me was love. What's the purpose of a banner? A banner is this. In military, once again, if there were an army that was large enough to have banners, in other words, there was the cavalry, there was the archers, there's all these different things, but they had banners. In other words, the reason why was because if you're in the midst of a battle, and you lose your place, you get caught up in this, and you look around, you're like, wait a minute, I don't know these people around me. And you look around, and you see your banner. Oh, I belong over there. That's where my group is. That was the purpose of the banners. She looks at him, she says, I belong with him. His banner is over me, right? I belong there. This is my guy. That's what she's saying right here. Now, keep going. Here's what's interesting. Sustain me with cakes of raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am lovesick. Some of you adults may remember this. Y'all remember the fad of green M&Ms a few years ago? Some of you did. You laughed. All right, here's the deal. They thought it got you in the mood. Back then, listen to me. Back then, it was a marketing ploy. But anyway, back then, they thought that anything with tiny seeds. By the way, yes, raisins do have seeds, okay? They have seeds. By the way, have you ever eaten like a fig Newton? And you know that grit, that's seeds in that little fig there type deal, okay? Well, here's the deal. They have little seeds. Also, if you bite into the core of an apple, what are you going to find? Little tiny seeds. They thought if you ate those things, it got you in the mood. So here's the case. His banner over me is love. She says, sustain me with cakes of raisins. Refresh me with apples, for I'm lovesick. In other words, somebody give me some raisin cakes. Somebody give me some apples. I'm lovesick. And then notice what happens right here. She says this. She said, his left hand is under my head and his right hand embraces me. Oh, this is a very intimate position. Think about it. This is not the Frankenstein dance that you do in junior high school. This is left hand under my head, right hand embraces me. This is a close-up grip right here. And we see this, and because of this, she's about to melt. But she says this, by the gazelles, by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it please. In other words, it's still not ready yet. Y'all, let me ask you this question. How do you build a great campfire? Do you start with one log, and then you put just lighter fluid all over it, and then take a match and light it? Woof! No, because then what's going to happen? Then it's going to go right back down. Y'all are having way too much fun in that back corner with this. All right? And then it goes right back down, okay? Here's the deal. You don't build a good campfire that way. Instead, what do? You start with some paper, and then you take some leaves, and then you take some little twigs, and then you take some larger sticks, and then some limbs, right? Pieces of limb. Then after that, then the log on top. That's how you build a great campfire. Well, let me just go ahead and say this. You start that way, the same way building a great relationship. And what I mean by that is the fact that you start with your base. There has to be respect. There has to be love. There has to be trust. You start that way, okay? So that's what they did. Then we go into the next thing. Number 3 is this, the art of courtship. What is courtship? Well, young people don't use the term courtship anymore, do they? Type deal. It's kind of like, what I mean by that is there's a difference between dating and courting. Dating, you're not really official. You're just going on dates, having a good time. But courting is where the young people say, now, we're going out, right? We're going out. That's what that means. And so, in other words, you better not be seeing someone else during this time period, okay? We belong to one another. We're not engaged yet, but we belong to one another, okay? The art of courtship is found in verse 8 of chapter 2 through chapter 3, verse 11, okay? Now, I want you to notice chapter 2, verse 11. Listen to this. This is what it says right here. It says this, "For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth her green figs, and the vines with the tender grapes give a good smell. Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away." Stop right there. What time of the year is this? I heard somebody say that. Springtime. Now let me explain. Why did he say this? Their love is in springtime. Let me explain to you. In all relationships, your love will go through the seasons. Let me explain. When you first start dating, there's that exciting, everything's in bloom. It's springtime, right? But then after you've been together for a while, then you may go through summer, as far as there may be some heated discussions, right? And because of that, guess what? Some of those things, because of the heat, we then go into fall, which means some of the things start falling off. Some of those leaves and some of those blossoms that had bloomed earlier now starting to fall away to the side, right? And if you're not careful, then you head into winter. And what happens in winter? It's cold and things die. Now, there are a lot of times in a lot of relationships where people are like, we're in winter. We're in winter. And things have died. But here's what I want to remind you of. If that's you, you're here tonight, and you're like, man, we are in winter. Let me remind you of something. What comes after winter? Spring. So keep fighting. Keep hanging in there. Spring is coming. Spring is coming. But the goal, listen to me, is to keep it in spring. As we're going to see throughout the rest of this book. So, it's springtime, but your goal is to keep it there. Now, your relationship will go through those other times, but springtime is the goal. Matter of fact, she even asked for accountability from her brothers. This is so good. Listen to this. She says right here, she looks to her brothers in verse 15, and she says, "Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes." What is this? She looks to her brothers, and she says this, the foxes here are the problems. And she said, because the thing is, if you don't deal with the little foxes, eventually they're going to turn into bigger foxes, and those bigger foxes will ruin the vineyard. And they'll eat up all the grapes, and you got a bigger problem. In other words, she says, guys, brothers, she looks to her brothers, and she says, do y'all see any problems here? Even little problems. Because the little problems will turn into bigger problems. She said, I want to know. And so that's what she's going right here, and she's asking their opinion on this. Now, let's keep going. She says this, but then she says, my beloved is mine, I am his, he feeds his flock among the lilies. And then she says this, she looks at Solomon, and they're just courting, I remind you, and she says this, until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, turn my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag up on the mountains of Bethar. Let me explain to you. Does anyone know what a stag is? It's a horse. It's a breeder horse. And here's the deal. She actually says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, turn my beloved be like a gazelle or a young stag upon the mountains of Bethar. If you look at a map throughout any point in time in history, you will never find a place called Bethar. Bethar is not an actual place. Bethar is a Hebrew word, and it means this, twin mountains. She's dealing with passion. And she says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, come and be like this stag upon these twin mountains. I'm not going to go into detail. Verse 3. Chapter 3. I'm sorry. Okay? Here's what's happening. Okay? Some of y'all are already at this point. Shh! We don't talk about the alligator! Okay? That's where y'all are at tonight. I can tell the uncomfortable tone in the room. Some of y'all are like, do I laugh? Do I go on? I don't know. But anyway. Chapter 3, listen to me. She dreams about him. She dreams about him, and she has a vivid dream. To the point to where she even says in verse 4, scarcely I passed by, I found the one I loved, I held him, I would not let him go, until I had brought him to the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who conceived me. She's dreaming about it now. But then she says this. She says, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles, by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. In other words, girls, hold me accountable. Now I'm dreaming about it. Hold me accountable, okay? And that's what happens. Then in verse 6 through 11, we see their wedding day. Their wedding day. Brother Colin, how do you know it's the wedding day? Because look at verse 11. Verse 11 says this. Go forth, O daughters of Zion, and see King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day of the gladness of his heart. There it is. It's their wedding day. We know this is their wedding day. But listen to me, what comes after the wedding day? Honeymoon. There you go. The honeymoon. And this is where we get into number 4 of our outline, the art of intimacy. The art of intimacy. And this is in chapter 4, verse 1, all the way through chapter 5, verse 16. The art of intimacy. Now let me explain to you something, and I'm about to go ahead and tell you right now, I'm about to make some of you very uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable saying this in front of you. They did not have the reception and then go off on the honeymoon. After they had the ceremony, there was a tent set up to the side where the husband and wife then would go inside the tent, consummate the marriage while everyone stood outside waiting for them. They then came outside after they consummated the marriage, and then they said, let the party begin. No pressure. Right? That's what they did. We're going to see that in a little bit. I'm going to back it up with Scripture. Okay? But that's what they did. But at this point in time in this chapter, they're in the tent. How do you know? Well, let's look right here. We see this. They've gone into the tent. And I want to let you know in chapter 4 right here, he describes her from the head down, and she's only wearing 2 things. She's still wearing her veil and a necklace. That's it. Okay? He starts describing. Now, we're not going to go through all this. You're like, why not? Well, read it for yourself later on. But this is what happens, okay? Now, we know that they did not give in to temptation earlier when they wanted to. Why do you say that, Brother Colin? Well, look at actually verse 12. He says this as he's describing her head down. I'll go ahead and tell you, he's described her neck. Which, by the way, I do want to say this. He does say this. He says, behold your fair, my love, behold your fair. You have dove's eyes behind your veil. Still wearing this. Now, let me go ahead and say this. I don't want to miss this. Men, please take notes right here. This is the most romantic line you could ever say to your wife. Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Mount Gilead. Let me explain to you here. If you're coming up on a mountain or a hill and you see a whole flock of goats that's running down the hill, what does it look like? It's wavy. She has long, wavy hair. Okay? Then, this is so good. He's Solomon. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep which have come up from the washing, every one of which bears twins, and none is barren among them. Let me explain to you. Have you ever seen a sheep that's all woolly, hasn't been sheared in a while? They're nasty, they're dirty. Well, once you shear them, they're clean. So in other words, he says this, your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep, they're clean, which have come from the washing, every one of which bears twins. This one looks like this one. In other words, it's straight. And then it says this, and none is barren among them. They're all there. What a great thing, right? Especially back then, they didn't have dentistry like we have today, right? Orthodontics, they didn't have that. She had wonderful teeth. They were clean, straight, and they were all there. What a plus back then. But then he works his way down, and then verse 3 talks about her lips are like scarlet. Verse 4 says, your neck is like the Tower of David built for an army. Let me ask you this. Can you see a person's neck when their head is down? Not really. You see the side. But remember, her self-esteem at the very beginning. Don't look upon me. I'm dark, yet I'm still lovely. Then I'm the roses of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. Now she is able to stand in front of her husband, nude, with her head held high, because of how he's treated her. Her self-esteem is through the roof. Her head is held high. Man, guys, let's take some notes there, right? And so that is the case. He works his way down. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, he's working this way down, and we know, now getting to the part what I was talking about earlier, we know that they didn't give in to temptation earlier. Why? Verse 12, he says this, a garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. She's what? She's a virgin. That's right. So we see, even though they dealt with temptation, even though they dealt with passion, they didn't give in. They didn't give in. So we see that right there. Okay? But do you remember that vineyard earlier that was talking about? Do you remember the fact that she said, but my own vineyard I have neglected? You remember that? Well, you know what he does? He brags on her vineyard. And he goes in, and let me go ahead and explain this to you. He says this in verse 13. He says, your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with pleasant fruits, fragrant henna with spikenard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all the chief spices, a fountain of gardens, a well of living waters, and streams from Lebanon. In other words, what a great garden this is. What a great vineyard. Now also I want to remind you something. Before she said, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Right? That's what she said before. Do not awaken. But then in verse 16 she says, awake, O north wind! It's time. And she says, and come, O south, blow upon my garden that its spices may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits. She gives herself to them. She gives herself to him. And we know that they are intimate at that point in time because of the very next verse. Chapter 5, verse 1. He says, I've come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I've gathered my myrrh with my spice. I've eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I've drunk my wine with my milk. Is there one word that really sticks out there to you? My. The two have become one. The two have become one. Now, the next verse, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this, is a twofold meaning verse. There's not many verses in the Bible that is this, but this is one of them. What I mean by that is this. Solomon comes out of the tent. It is believed that this is the case. He comes out and he says, eat, O friends, drink, yes, drink deeply, O beloved ones. In other words, the party's on, right? Let's celebrate now. It's been done. But what I mean by that is also many scholars believe that someone else speaks here as well. Who have we not heard from this entire book? Anybody? God. Many scholars believe that this is also God telling Solomon and Mrs. Shulamite, saying, enjoy this. I've created this. This is a blessing. This is a gift to you. How do you know that, Brother Colin? Well, we're actually going to see that in the next chapter. That I believe is the reason why. And scholars point to that as well. That God is saying, enjoy this, okay? But friends, I want to remind you, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, okay? I want you to understand this. But right here, she speaks up. She says this. Once again, she gives herself to them. This is what happens. He comes out. But then, guess what we see next? In the art of intimacy, we also see their first argument. Now, I want to remind you, we don't know how long this has been after their honeymoon. We don't really know at what point in time. But notice verse 2. Immediately after, she says this. I sleep, but my heart is awake. It is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, my locks with drops of night. Now, what do y'all think he's wanting? To be intimate with his wife. He's coming knocking on her bedroom door. Now, I remind you, the same woman that's like, hey, all right, awake, north wind. Now, notice what she says in the very next verse, verse 3. I've taken off my robe. How can I put it on again? I've washed my feet. How can I defile them? In other words, not tonight, I have a headache. What do you mean? Because she is saying this. He's knocked on the door. He just said this. She looks at the door. She's like, if I get up, that means I have to put my robe on. Now, I remind you, they didn't have carpeted floors back then. They actually had a basin of water that sit next to their bed. And right when they got in bed, they would wash the bottom of their feet off so that they didn't get their bed dirty. She's like, if I open for him for this, I got to put my robe on. Then I got to wash my feet again. It's really worth it. Now, I remind you, Solomon was who? The king. You don't tell the king no. But that's what she does. Now, notice what Solomon does here. She says, she says, my beloved put his hand by the latch of the door. In other words, they didn't have locks like we do today. They had a latch. And he was able to open the door just enough. And he's reaching for the latch. And it says this, and my heart yearned for him. In other words, I better open up for him. And she says this, I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands gripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been walking down, maybe you got a handrail out there, and then all of a sudden your hand touches some gum that somebody stuck underneath there? Now, what do? You sit there and go, what is this? No. Immediately your hand touches it when you do. Oh, what is that? She touches the lock. She realizes that she pulls back, and her hand is dripping with liquid myrrh. He wasn't trying to open the lock. Instead, he rubbed liquid myrrh on her lock, which was a symbol of, I respect you locking me out. See, honey? But, listen to me, it's not a good thing. He respected her. Now, once again, he could have said, I'm the king, you're going to open up. Now, how do you know he wasn't okay with this, Brother Colin? Keep going. She says, I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and was gone. My heart leaped up when he spoke. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. Gentlemen, what is this? The silent treatment. That's what it is. She can hear him when he's talking. She calls out for him, and he doesn't answer. You know he's hearing her. He's upset. He respected her, but he's upset. Now, here's the issue. Paul addresses it even in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. That we are not to withhold ourselves from our mates. That's what it says. Read it. Spend time in it. Verse 1 through 8. He says, actually, what you're doing is you're causing your mate to sin if you do that. And so, what she has done is she has withheld herself from her husband. And notice this goes back into what I was talking about earlier. Okay? She says this. Called him, but he gave no answer. The watchmen who went about the city found me. They struck me. They wounded me. The keepers of the walls took my veil away from me. Stop right there for a moment. If Solomon's the king, then who is she? The queen. Do you think some servants beat the queen? No. Who's the watchman? Who's been watching over them this entire time? God. Who said earlier, eat, O friends, drink, yes, drink deeply, O beloved. In other words, I'm giving you this. This is a gift. And yet she has said no to that gift. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever been convicted to the point to where you felt you were beaten down? Have you ever sinned against God and felt so convicted that you were just like, man, I'm beat. God, I'm sorry. The watchman beat her and took her veil away from her. Said, fine, if you're going to act this way, the honeymoon's over. Take the veil off if you're going to act this way. That was symbolic. And that's what we see right here, okay? So, she starts looking. She runs into her friends. Let me move on real quickly here. She runs to her friends, and this is the first argument that she's having right here, and this newness wears off, and once again, you're not just going off love anymore, and she asks her friends to help him and help her see, and she's like, if you see Solomon, keep going, look right here in verse 8, I charge your daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I'm lovesick. And then they get, those daughters of Jerusalem earlier on, that was like, oh, this is so good, they got a little jealous. And notice what they say right here. What is your beloved more than another beloved, O fairest among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved that you so charge us? In other words, what makes him so special? Now, ladies, let me tell you something about us guys. Even though we will never say it, we enjoy it when we hear our spouses, our girlfriends, when we're being girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it may be. We enjoy it when you brag on us. I'm just saying it. Even if we don't know, once again, I appreciate the fact that my wife brags on me. Now, I'm not going to say, hey, you go brag on me. No. But when I hear my wife bragging on me, I'm just going to stick my chest out a little bit. Right? She starts bragging about who Solomon is. And matter of fact, we actually see what Solomon looks like right here. What? A little bit. We see a little bit about what Solomon looks like. Listen to this. My beloved is white and ruddy, chief among 10,000. In other words, he's the best of the best. She's bragging on him. Keep going. His head is like the finest gold. His locks are wavy and black as a raven. In other words, he had long, black, wavy hair. Keep going. His eyes are like doves by the rivers of waters washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are like a bed of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are lilies dripping liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is carved ivory inlaid with sapphire. Now, this is normally how Felicia describes me to her friends. His body is carved ivory inlaid with sapphire. In other words, listen, Solomon was jacked. He was ripped. And that's what it's saying right here. And she says that his legs are pillars of marble set on bases of fine gold. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. Now, here's the theme of the entire book. If you don't mind writing your Bibles, please highlight this over and over and over again, because this is it right here. Listen to this. She says this. Yes, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Listen. You're going to be lovers, but you got to be friends. You got to be friends. You got to enjoy one another. You got to enjoy the company of one another. You've got to. And that's what she is saying right here. Finally, the ladies are like, okay, we'll go look corn with you. They're around the corner, and she sees him. She sees him. Now, she says in verse 2, notice this right here. By the way, this is now number 5. Number 5, the art of forgiveness. The art of forgiveness. Chapter 6. Guess what she finds him doing? He's picking flowers. He's picking flowers, and he looks up and he speaks. Now, when most of us would look, men were upset, we gave them the silent treatment, we would look up and say, what do you want? Right? Look what Solomon says. Men, let's take some notes. He looks at her, and he says this, oh, my love, you're as beautiful as Tirzah. It's kind of like Miami Beach. Lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. Turn your eyes away from me, for they have overcome me. Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn sheep, which have come up from the washing, every one of which bears twins, and none is barren among them. Like a piece of pomegranate are your temples behind your veil. Now, wait a minute. When did we hear this before? On the honeymoon night. Now, when the watchman convicted her, beat her, took the veil away from her, Solomon lifts her up again. He says, let's get back to when that veil was on. And he lifts her back up. And then once again, he brags on her for who she is, and he handles it calmly. He doesn't rub it in her face. You withheld yourself from me. Now you've got some payback to do. He doesn't do any of that. No, he handles it calmly. And he brags on his wife, and he loves on her. And as a matter of fact, he then even says, he says, my dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, the favor of the one who bore her. The daughter saw her and called her blessed. The queen's concubines, they praised her. Who is she who looks forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, awesome as an army of banners? He is bragging on her, even when she doesn't deserve it. He's bragging on his wife, loving on her. And notice what she does in verse 11. I went down to the garden of nuts to see the vineyard of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded and the pomegranates had bloomed. What time of the year is this? Springtime. In other words, she's saying, I want to make sure our love is still in spring. So we saw them. They were in springtime, went through some summer, even some fall, but before it got to winter, she wanted to make sure, and he made sure that they got back to springtime. That's the goal. That is the goal. And that's what happened right here. And so even after their fight, she wants to make sure it's in springtime. And then we get to number 6, chapters 7 and 8, very quickly, the art of staying in love. What is the art of staying in love? They are now older. And she has just asked at the end of chapter 6, what would you see in the Shulamite? In other words, honey, what do you see in me? What makes me so special? Why do you treat me the way that you do? Why are you so good to me? And he tells her. And like he described her before he described her from the head down, but now he describes her from the feet up. Now we know that they are older. How do you know that, Brother Colin? Listen to verse 2. Okay, listen to verse 2. Going down to verse 5. He says this. Your navel is a rounded goblet. It lacks no blended beverage. Your waist is a heap of wheat set about with lilies. What? Oh, that's so romantic. Men, do not say this to your wives when you go home. But let me explain to you what he's saying. She's gotten a little older. She's put on a few pounds. The heavier a person gets, the deeper their navel gets sometimes. He says, honey, your navel's a rounded goblet. But he says it lacks no blended beverage. What was their blended beverage? Wine. Let me explain to you. He's the wisest man who ever lived. Wine was considered a springtime blessing. Then he says, your waist is a heap of wheat. Oh, God. Stop while you're ahead, Solomon. I'm going to have to dig this hole you're in here, right? But guess what? Wheat was an autumn blessing. He uses her weight to describe what a blessing she is to him. Honey, you're a blessing in the spring. You're a blessing in the autumn. You're a blessing to me year-round. What a way with words. He could have probably used different words. But still, he's bragging on her. And we know that they're older. Keep going. Notice this. He goes on. He describes her. He's still physically attracted to his wife. Look at this. He says, verse 6, he says, how fair and how pleasant you are, love with your delights. The stature of yours is like palm tree, and your breasts like its clusters. I said, I will go up to that palm tree. I will take hold of its branches. Y'all talk about that later. And then she says, verse 11, come to my beloved, let us go forth to the field, let us lodge in the village, right? In other words, she's like, let's keep dating. Let's keep dating. Now, let me also say this. We also know that they were older. I missed this verse. Verse 5. He says, your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and the hair of your head is like purple. A king is held captive by your tresses. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a lady that has jet black hair, and when she's turning gray, it gives a purplish tint? She's turning gray. She's gaining weight. She's turning gray. But he's like, a king is still held captive in your tresses. In other words, honey, I'm still a slave to you. You're beautiful. Man, this guy's, he's got it. And he's bragging on his wife, and that's what we see right here. And she says, hey, let's go. She says, let us go forth to the field. Let's lodge in the villages in verse 11. Then verse 12, she says, let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine has budded. What time of the year is that? Springtime. In other words, hey, let's go on a date. Let's get a hotel, and let's make sure our love is still in springtime. That's what she's saying. That's what it says. And then here's what's funny. She says this. Verse 13. The mandrakes give off a fragrance. What in the world? Let me explain to you. This goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 30. Story of Rachel and Leah. If you remember, Jacob loved Rachel. And when he saw her, he goes to marry her. And you remember the daddy says, no, you got to work for 7 years to get Rachel. He works for 7 years. The day of the wedding comes, they say their vows, they go into the tent to consummate the marriage. He lifts up the veil, and it's not Rachel. It's Leah. He goes out to daddy and says, wait a minute, what's going on here? And he says, well, it's not our custom to marry off the younger daughter first. You had to marry Leah. You work another 7 years, and then I'll give you Rachel. Now, at that point in time, I said, listen here, old man. You're going to give me what I work for. We're going to hold up our end of the bargain. But instead, he works for another 7 years. Then he marries Rachel. But there was a problem. If you remember, Rachel, he loved Rachel. The problem was Rachel couldn't have children. Leah could. And he was having children through Leah. Well, one day, Rachel goes to Leah's tent, and she sees a bag of mandrakes. Now, what's the deal with the mandrake? Do you remember the raisin cakes? Do you remember the apples earlier on? Same way with mandrakes. The reason why, I'm just telling you right now, if you Google a mandrake, the root of the mandrake looks just like a male part. So they thought if they ate that mandrake, it got them in the mood. She walks in the tent, she sees the bag of mandrakes that Leah has, and she says, hey, give me some of your mandrakes. And Leah actually tells her, says, listen, you have his heart. At least I can have some pleasure with him. I'm just telling you. That's what she said. She said, no. And so Rachel basically says, well, you know what? It's my time to have him, but I'll let you have him. You give me some of your mandrake. That way, when I get him back, he'll be in the mood. That's what she's saying. So this lady is saying right here, hey, let's go lodge in the villages. Well, let's go have some fun there. Let's make sure our love is still in springtime. The mandrakes are giving off a fragrance. Y'all, this is in the Bible. And that's what we see, though. That they are still dating. They're still in love. Now listen to me. The book actually ends with them going to visit her brothers. They're on their way going to visit their brothers, and it's been so long they don't even recognize her. Look at chapter 8, verse 5. It says this, who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? I remind you, she's put on a few pounds. Her hair is now turning gray. They don't recognize her, okay? They don't recognize that. So they don't really know who this is, but she comes up, they explains. But before she talks to the brothers, she tells Solomon not to be jealous of the time that she's going to give to her family and friends. Don't be jealous of this. As a matter of fact, listen to verse 6. He says this of chapter 8. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. It's kind of like a tattoo. In other words, I'm not going anywhere. For love is as strong as death, jealousy as cruel as the grave. Its flames are flames of fire, a most vehement flame. In other words, don't be jealous, okay? But guess what? The book ends, and he's not. Now, I don't want to skip over too much, but I do want to let you know this. The brothers speak up talking about what type of girl she was earlier, and they were going to be protective of her, and they were. She says, I was faithful. But then after that, here's what happens. The book ends with verse 13 and 14. She says, matter of fact, verse 12, she says, my own vineyard is before me, you also may have 1,000, those who tend its fruit 200. Verse 13, you who dwell in the gardens, the companions, listen for your voice, let me hear. He just wants to hear her voice. Still, years later, he just wants to spend time with her. Let me hear your voice. And she replies with this, make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. In other words, the book ends with her saying, hurry home, dear. What a way to end the book. But listen to me, very quickly. I want you to notice two things that is never mentioned in this book. Their jobs, nor their kids. Now, we see a little bit of their jobs as he was feeding his flock among the lilies earlier on. But the reason why you don't see the job and their kids is because you cannot build your marriage around your kids, and you cannot build your marriage around your job. The reason why is because eventually those kids are going to move out. One of these days, those kids are going to move out. Okay? But listen, I love my boys. But anyway, one day you're also going to retire. Or that job may move on. You may lose your job. You don't want to turn and look at your mate 18 years later after the kids move out, grow up and move out, or once again 30 years later after you retire from your job, and you turn and look at your mate and say, now who are you? Because you put your focus on the kids and on your job and on those other things when you've stopped dating. Listen, keep dating. Keep lodging in the village. Make sure that focus is on the one that you become one with God being at the center. That's the key. Hey, listen, I know tonight was a little bit longer. Your memory verse for next week. Until the day breaks. No, I'm just kidding. Chapter 8, verse 6. Chapter 8, verse 6. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love's as strong as death, jealousy as cruel as the grave. Its flames are flames of fire, a most vehement flame. Remember that. All right. Very quickly, questions now. Yes, sir. Christ in the church. It's not that. How do you know, Brother Colin? Well, because of the chapter 4, we don't see the perversion of that. Okay? With Christ in us. This is a book that's written about a husband and wife. With God blessing it. That's where God fits into this. Okay? God blessing it, God being with it. Okay? So that's what this book is about. Okay? And once again, yes, we do see Christ all throughout this book. And we see Christ's love for us in this. But we also see the love that Christ has in the fact that he has given us a mate to love and to cherish with one another. That's what we see here. Yeah. Any others? Yes, go ahead.
Just like Esther, God's not mentioned. The word God's not mentioned in Psalm.
Right. That's the only 2 books. That's not. So, yeah.
Solomon didn't seem to use his full potential because he was involved in idolatry and also so many wives, I guess.
Yes, sir. Matter of fact, with multiple wives, we talked about it a few weeks ago. That's what turned him away. But in answering one of the questions that you sent me, I do believe that Solomon repented, and I believe that he repented at the end of Ecclesiastes, the very end there of Ecclesiastes that we saw last week, was the fact that he was like, listen, the end of it all is this. Once again, fear God, right? The knowledge of the Lord. And so I do believe that at the end of his life, he was repentant when he realized everything else was vanity. Absolutely. Yeah.
Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
Yes, sir.
I'm not trying to be facetious, but what's the wisdom in that?
Well, it wasn't. That was his folly. Absolutely. Yeah. Kyle, you can't prepare tonight, man. No, we're good. He told me coming in, he's like, I got the questions for tonight. All right. Anything else?
We're still live.
Oh, are you? Okay. All right. It's a great book. It is a great book. All right? Okay. Let's close up. We do have business meeting tonight, so very quickly though, I'm